Добрий день, з вами Ольга.
Hello, it is Olga Atamanova. I welcome everyone in Ukraine Media Center. It is 561 days since the onset of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation, and right now we are going to discuss about the meeting between Putin and President Erdoğan. Let's hear from Vasyl Bodnar, Ukraine's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary to the Republic of Turkey. Vasyl, we know very briefly about the things that happened the day before. Erdoğan has made some statement about considerable signals about the grain agreement, but we are not seeing any changes after the meeting. Is it correct to assume that no progress has been made about the resumption of the grain agreement? Well, actually, all the media component of this visit is insufficient. Right now, we only heard the position of the Russian Federation that were announced after the meeting. There were some requirements about the SWIFT payments and the availability of the Turkish ports. So it's yet another attempt to use the Turkish government for the continuation of this blackmailing of Ukraine and creating conditions for business as usual for the ordinary interactions that existed before war. Well, we are ready for the resumption of the grain initiative, but we do not have to make concessions to the Russian Federation. We do not have to agree to those proposals that relieve the punishments for the aggressive war against Ukraine. Surely the list of issues discussed during the meeting are not limited to this issue that we are focusing on there, but they also have their bilateral issues about economy, business, energy, tourism, and regional issues that are faced by the Russia and Turkey. Grain initiative was one of the parts of that dialogue. No breakthrough has happened, and I actually didn't expect anything serious to happen because Turkey knows quite well about the position of Ukraine, and before that, before President Erdogan's visit to Russia, we had some fruitful negotiations with Turkey, and a couple of weeks ago we had the economic advisor of the president visiting Ukraine, and as the foreign minister Kuleba has mentioned, the shade of Ukraine was present in those negotiations. And do you know about any subsequent steps that Turkey will take to resume the grain agreement? And is it possible to have this corridor functioning without participation of Russia? So the proposal to work without Russia has been transferred to Turkey. There is no full confirmation, but the ships are already going through territorial waters, including waters of Turkey, without any limitations, and it is quite rational because, well, quite often there were cases when the aggressive country limited access of ships to Ukraine. For instance, Pivdani port was not functioning for a couple of weeks, and we also had limits on the products that could be exported from Ukraine. For now, just 4 ships have left using humanitarian corridors, and there are no limitations imposed on any of the Ukrainian products, so this can be one of the main routes to regulate the situation. Also, right now, the communication between Turkey and UN is happening to develop some consolidated positions. We also expect the communication between Ukraine and Turkey to unfold very quickly in the nearest days. Or as a part of the General Assembly, we want to understand how to move forward. We are taking constructive position concerning our partners, and we are going to develop the mechanism that would be profitable for our countries, but without relieving sanctions imposed on Russia, because it would be a wrong way to go. And yeah, we also saw that the international community is closely watching what's happening at this meeting. We all expected that these relations between Russia and Turkey will slightly cool down, but as the New York Times has written on Monday, there is some skepticism about what has happened. We can see that the economic cooperation between these two countries only grows stronger. Yes, this tells us that there are some pragmatic interests of Turkey that it is implementing in its relations with Russia. So wherever possible, it actually increases its relations, but also at the same time there is some tense situation in the north of Syria, where there are some Arab troops supported by Turkey. They are fighting against Kurds, supported by the US and to an extent by Russia. So there is a point of tension there. Karabakh in Azerbaijan is yet another such point where the Russian troops are trying to keep the Armenian enclave, and the situation grows tenser. So the armed forces of Azerbaijan, backed by Turkey, they are getting more numerous there. So in these relations between Ukraine and between Turkey and Russia, we also need to understand the points of contradictions between these two countries. So I would not fully trust all of those conclusions made by the international media, because they considering their own interests as well. So we need to consider what's there in the Turkish media. We also need to consider our own interests. So we need to have strong strategic relations with Turkey, because well, we have a million important initiatives with them, and we should not be impacted by the information that is being disseminated, including information disseminated by Russia. We need to be very careful in what we read, and we need to remember about our interests. So the obvious next question I have is about the strengthening of relationship between Russia and Turkey. Will it impact the relationship with Ukraine? No, no, it will not, because we have our separate tracks of relations and the priorities that we have defined on the bilateral level. They do not contradict with what exists between Russia and Turkey. So yeah, there was some impact on the bilateral relations between Russia and Ankara, and Russia had a very negative perception of the Azov fighters going back home, but it was just a short emotional moment, and wherever possible, the parties came back to pragmatic relations. So, indeed, some of the situations can elicit our emotional reaction, and as I'm telling to my Turkish friends, Erdogan having any discussions with Putin. This is something disliked by Ukraine. But yeah, there are some things that are of interest to Ukraine, such as grain corridor and the exchange of prisoners of war, etc. So there are some very important aspects of our bilateral and regional relations. Well, such as, for instance, the implementation of President Zelensky's peace formula. So we have some questions from the floor. Hello once again. I wanted to ask a follow-up question. After the meeting between Putin and Erdogan, Erdogan mentioned that Ukraine has to be more flexible in its approach to the resumption of the Green Initiative. Do you think Erdogan will keep promoting this idea in the international community? Will this idea become popular? Restoring this initiative at the expense of Ukraine. And also there is a trilateral agreement between Turkey, Russia and Qatar about sending 1 million tons of grain. Yeah, thank you for your interesting questions. Question number one, yes, we understand this signal from President Erdogan. We are ready to have any constructive discussions with our intermediaries, which are the UN and Turkey, but the crucial and unchangeable position we have is that we cannot be supporting Russia in relieving its sanctions, because it will only continue the war, it will help finance Russia's military industry, and it will also threaten the regional security, which will in turn impact Turkey. So this is something we keep emphasizing in bilateral communication between our parties. And speaking of the next steps that can be done, well, this trilateral initiative between Qatar, Russia, and Turkey, it has been worked on for 3 months. It's Russia's attempt to somehow propose some humanitarian initiative substituting the Green Corridor with its own proposals. So this proposal about 1 billion tons of grain, of course, it cannot substitute the scopes of grain exported through the Green Corridor from Ukraine. And as it was rightly mentioned by President Erdogan when discussing the problem of the Green Corridor, of course, this initiative could be a possibility as an addition, but for now we do not see such opportunity. Right now we are still having discussions with Turkey to understand how the negotiation process is proceeding and what Turkey is ready to see, to restore the Green Corridor for the global food security. By the way, Turkey is one of our crucial partners in the food security group implementing the peace formula of President Zelensky. And so we are also working to get the Global South on board to ensure a safe operation of the Green Corridor and ensure food security for the rest of the countries. So one more follow-up question. Yesterday, the foreign minister of the US in a meeting with Ukraine has announced that the Danube corridor will be developed as an alternative, but it was mentioned by President Erdogan that these alternative pathways are not effective. Keeping this position of Turkey in mind, is it somehow possible that the Danube Grain Corridor will be somehow compromised to just insist on the Black Sea as the only alternative? No, these two tracks essentially develop in parallel. Even before the grain initiative was launched last year, grain was exported through Danube ports. So the ports on the Danube are not among the ones included on the list of the grain initiative ports. So despite the functioning of the grain initiative, Danube ports can be used. But since Russia is not a part of those alternative routes, such as the humanitarian corridor we established for the ships to leave Ukrainian ports, the ships that have been there since the onset of the full-scale invasion, they are not fully safe because Russia does not guarantee they will not be attacked. So in this specific case, there is a need to put in place the necessary insurance policies, and this is crucial for the international carriers to express consent for the use of the ports of Odessa and not being afraid of some Russia's missile attacks or using mines, etc. Because right now in the humanitarian corridor, the ships are using our insurance, and for now it does not create conditions for the systemic use of the ports of Odessa by the ships. So yeah, two things can go together. Danube has its prospects as well. Therefore, the attacks that do happen at night, the attacks on Reni and Ismail port infrastructure, they confirm that Russia is trying to block this pathway. So we are working with the international partners also to strengthen air defense and also to apply pressure on Russia to prevent attacks on the port infrastructure and the grain storage facilities located there, because this indeed could be harmful in our attempts to provide grain to international markets. And one more general question. Before this meeting between Presidents Putin and Erdogan, there was lots of attention from the media, but the conclusion was that the mission of Erdogan was failed, and actually the very fact that it's the president of Turkey has traveled to Russia and not vice versa, it also shows, in the opinion of journalists, the weakness of President Erdogan. So what was the assessment in Turkey of this visit? Well, actually our media are making their analysis based on analysis of the international media, and it's not a fully objective description of the visit. Indeed, it was planned that Putin would come to Turkey, but he was afraid to do that, even though that Turkey is not a party to the International Criminal Court, and it had no plans of given Putin into the hands of ICC. this would be a very favorable development for Ukraine. But also, of course, we understand that the relations between Russian elite went tense after the knockdown of the Prigozhin aircraft. We still don't know for sure whether Prigozhin was on board. And so basically Turkey itself has got the benefit out of these negotiations, and the dialogue itself, the dialogue with Putin, it gives President Erdoğan some political dividends in his conversations with the countries of the West. So the process in and of itself is important, even though results are not there really. And in Turkey, the media are paying attention to the fact that this is one of the few representatives of the global community speaking with Putin and on much better terms than his conversations with Macron or let's say Scholz. So this increase in the scope of trade between Russia and Turkey, it shows that Turkey is not losing anything in these dealings from both the practical and political standpoint. But it's very important for us that the grain corridor was indeed discussed there, and it's also up to UN to support us stronger rather than supporting the aggressor country. So we encourage everyone, we encourage the international partners to avoid pressurizing us as the weakest link who can succumb to pressure. No, they need to use their pressure against Russia, both in terms of the Green Corridor and in terms of stopping their war. And this is exactly what President Erdoğan has mentioned before. He's ready to be the intermediary between the sides of the conflict as a mediator. So one final question about the perception in the Turkish society. We know that Russians keep attacking our ports and port infrastructure and grain storage facilities. Is there any response of the Turkish government and Turkish diplomats? The public response is not happening, and it's only the media who is sharing objective information on what's happening in Ukraine. The Turkish society, as well as the international community at large, has already got accustomed to this war. They deal with their own issues, but in the public discussions and in our negotiations with our colleagues here, we see quite well that they have the understanding of what Russia is doing and why, and they also understand that this aggression is also a threat to Turkey as a NATO country and as a country that is important on the regional level, that is sometimes not aligned with the position of the Russian Federation. So we clearly have some mutual understanding. We surely have close cooperation between our countries. And yeah, thank you, my dear ambassador, for joining us today. This was Vasyl Bodnar, the ambassador of Turkey in ambassador of Ukraine in Turkey, and our next panel discussion of education and war will take place at 2 p.m. Stay with us, and we are so grateful to the armed forces of Ukraine for being able to have these discussions. Thank you.